Nanjia was originally an unpopular illegitimate woman, but she didn't want the mountain chicken to turn into a phoenix, and instead became the queen of another country. I thought all the hardships were sweet, but unfortunately, fate is full of twists and turns. Once the palace changed, her husband died, and she fled to the ends of the earth with a pair of daughters. Enduring humiliation and burying one's name for more than 20 years, he finally avenged himself and returned to his rightful place. My wish has been fulfilled. Nanjia followed her deceased husband, but she didn't want to have a chance to start over again. Chapter 1. Selection and Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Nanjia's father was the chief consort of the current dynasty, while his mother, Aunt Song, was only a good concubine adopted by the main lord. There are 3 older brothers and 3 older sisters on top of Nanjia, and she is the youngest in the family. Aunt Song was not favored by the lord, so Nanjia was also looked down upon by other brothers and sisters in the mansion. In the vast Shofu mansion, Nanjia was named Miss Seven, but her life was not much better than that of the servants, and she didn't even have 2 decent pieces of jewelry. These days of looking up to others and feeling completely neglected, Nanjia could only silently endure and struggle with Aunt Song. Both mother and daughter were hoping that one day they could break free from the sea of suffering and be free. I thought the days would be wasted day by day, but I didn't expect fate to play a trick on me. In the year of Nanjia and Ji, there was a great border chaos, with gunpowder rising everywhere and the court unstable, but even worse things still lie ahead. The emperor passed away, the new emperor was young and unable to control the court situation, eunuchs manipulated power, and everyone was in danger. At this critical moment, fortunately, the regent sacrificed his life for the country, cooperated with all the good officials and elite generals, organized the court internally, and resisted enemy forces externally. After 3 months, he finally calmed down internal and external troubles, and the world returned to peace. After this battle, the treasury of Qingguo was empty and the military was weak, unable to resist the intimidation of another powerful enemy, Xianghua. The whole country was once again shrouded in the shadow of panic. At this moment, the father of Nanjia, the chief minister of the current dynasty, stepped forward to relieve your worries and proposed the method of marriage to seek stability between the 2 countries, allowing Qingguo to rest and regain its strength. When the new emperor was young, the marriage alliance was carried out by the regent on his behalf. After consultation between the 2 countries, a woman from the royal family was offered by the state of Qingguo to marry the ruler of Xianghua, and from then on, peace was established. Although the matter of marriage alliance has been decided, the selection with relatives has yet to be settled. The women of the Qing dynasty's royal family either marry into women or have not yet reached the age of hair, and there are no eligible female relatives to shoulder this heavy responsibility. Helpless, the regent had to choose from the children of the nobles and high-ranking officials. At this moment, the good father of Nanjia once again stood up and recommended his youngest daughter to the regent, requesting her to be granted the title of princess and a national peace treaty. The regent Wang was worried that no one would be competent, and someone recommended him. Of course, he was happy to see his success and decided with his family. When Nanjia learned that she had been appointed as a princess and was about to become a candidate to go to Xianghua for marriage, she knew that her fate had been predetermined. On the day of her wedding, her family brothers and sisters came to see her off. Looking at the once unkempt younger sister, now she has transformed into a phoenix on the head of a golden branch. The older brothers and sisters secretly sneer, slightly disdainful, but dare not say much. After all, this younger sister will be the queen of Xiang Kingdom in the future. Nanjia is not foolish either, she knows a bit about the thoughts of her brothers and sisters. Yes, what kind of good life can a princess who, due to the weakness of her country and her humble pursuit of perfection, go on a long journey to make peace in a foreign land? For Nanjia, it was just a change of cage, continuing to swallow her anger and bow down. Just this farewell, I'm afraid it will be difficult to see my aunt again in this life. Embarking on the path of reconciliation, from now on, far away from relatives, homeland, and all people and things related to oneself, Nanjia's heart, apart from sadness, is filled with endless confusion and sorrow. From now on, she will be alone. I don't know what kind of country the unfamiliar and distant Xianghua is, what kind of person is her husband, whom she has never met before. Nanjia sneered bitterly at herself. He is the ruler of a country, so he must be the dragon and phoenix among the people. He is always capable of standing tall and upright. So, would a proud son like him consider himself a small weak princess? Moreover, Nanjia is not yet a genuine member of the royal family, but a sacrificial victim who has been pushed to the top. I guess he wouldn't take himself seriously, would he? With such thoughts, it was a bumpy journey and a tiring journey, and it would take more than half a month before finally arriving in Xianghua. When Nanjia set foot on this unfamiliar land, she felt like the flowers and plants struggling to climb on the roadside in a storm. After struggling for a long time, she couldn't withstand the ravages of the storm and was instantly uprooted, drifting away with the wind, and withered with vitality. Nanjia followed the messenger who received the bride to the post station, rested for a day, and then went to the palace. She will stay in this palace until the day of her wedding before entering the palace to hold the wedding ceremony with the ruler of Xianghua. Only when the ceremony is completed can Nanjia truly become the queen of Xianghua. Chapter 2. Bridal Chamber Candles. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Soon, the big wedding season arrived. Nanjia is like a marionette, surrounded by people who walk into the main hall, up the steps, and towards her future husband. Until Su Shou was surrounded by a warm and thick force, Nanjia woke up like a dream. She quietly lifted her eyes, glanced at the figure walking in front of her, blushed instantly, and panicked for a moment. She had to quickly lower her eyes and dare not look again. After a busy day, Nanjia was already exhausted, with a sore back and waist, almost unable to lift her strength, but she dared not easily relax her mind. Now that I am in a foreign country and shoulder the heavy responsibility of making peace, I must be careful in everything. Any slight mistake can lead to false accusations, criticism, and even implicate my home country. Nanjia was afraid, so no matter how tired she was, she had to hold on. Just as Nanjia was so tired that she could hardly open her eyes, the sky finally turned late, but she didn't have time to catch a breath and was about to face the highlight of today, bridal chamber. Suddenly, Nanjia remembered the warmth of the person holding her hand in the daytime. It was so warm, like a touch of warm sunshine in the cold sky, unintentionally falling and quietly melting the frozen everything. Thinking about it, she blushed her cheeks again. When the door was pushed open, Nanjia's heart instantly rose to her throat, as if a big drum had been placed in her chest, making a thumping sound. At this moment, the rules and etiquette of the attendance taught by Aunt Shi in the palace had already been completely forgotten. Nanjia's mind was blank, and her whole body was feverish, as if about to burn. She sat on the spacious bed like this, looking down awkwardly at her feet in dark dragon boots, walking towards her step by step until someone picks up their chin, seeing a faint smile in the person's eyes, watch him turn around and walk towards the table, then take something and fold it back to the bedside. Somehow, they intertwined their arms and drank a cup of Hejin wine together. After drinking, he set his wine glass aside, waved his big palm, and let go of the heavy bed curtain. Her body was slowly laid down in the center of the happiness bed, and a shadow gradually shrouded her in front of her. Nanjia suddenly regained her soul, feeling extremely nervous, and an inexplicable fear rose in her heart, even her body trembling slightly. "Don't be afraid, I will pity you." Suddenly, Nanjia settled down. The person's voice was surprisingly pleasant at this moment, and his words miraculously calmed Nanjia's panicked and restless heart, as if possessed by a bewitching magic. The gentleness and patience in that person's tone were like the gentle breeze of March, gently brushing over the lake, causing several ripples to ripple in Nanjia's heart. Never before had he been treated so kindly by a man. Nanjia was flattered, but there was also a hint of anticipation and excitement, as if hoping to give more tenderness. In the midst of confusion, the two met candidly. There is a person with sword eyebrows and starry eyes, bronze skin, and a symmetrical body shape, there was a person with slightly parted cherry lips and a flushed face, alluring and alluring. Deep in love, mandarin ducks intertwine and entangle, forgetting oneself and blending emotions, difficult to part with. When the love was strong, Yunqi loudly called out "Ching Ching" and caressed Nanjia's cheeks over and over again. The softness and warmth in his eyes almost drowned Nanjia. Ching to love and care for one's family is to cherish one's family. I am not a Ching Ching, who should be a Ching Ching. This is a nickname between spouses. With a slight movement in her mind, Nanjia thought for a moment and responded with the title, husband, word by word, in a deep and shallow manner. The corners of Yunqi's eyes and eyebrows were filled with joy, as if he was very happy and encouraged, followed by his reckless behavior. Nanjia was both shy and angry, constantly cursing herself for not having enough composure. She was so easily led into the ditch by him, which was truly despicable. Unfortunately, this night is still long. Chapter 3. Heart-to-heart communication. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Previously, Nanjia always complained about the unfairness of the heavens and lamented the hardships of her life. She not only allowed her to be reborn in the Shofu mansion, but also why she was asked to become a nameless Miss Seven. Since I can remember, I have often been ostracized, suffering from grievances and heartache. Sometimes Nanjia often thinks, did she create too many obstacles in her previous life, so she is destined to repay them in this life. At first, she still had this resentment, but as time went on, the struggles she endured gradually became commonplace, and Nanjia's heart went from initial unwillingness to numbness. Unexpectedly, since then, Nanjia has forgotten that she was originally a flesh and blood person. The person who has always lived only in hardship suddenly tasted the sweetness. Nanjia's first reaction was not to be grateful for all the hardships, but to suspect that something was wrong with her body, so that she mistakenly tasted the bitterness as sweetness, or perhaps one is dreaming, otherwise how could one feel the sweetness of childhood dreams in reality, surpassing honey? Being in this unfamiliar country, watching the unfamiliar scenery, standing next to the person who is not very familiar but most intimate, Nanjia truly feels what it means to be willing to endure hardships. A person who would always curl up in the darkest corner was suddenly honored as a guest of honor. As he raised his hand, there was a cluster of stars and moons, and everywhere was respectful obedience. Nanjia was undoubtedly fearful and confused, but at the same time, he was secretly happy. Perhaps it was because the heavens saw her living in such a pitiful way that they pitied her so much. However, this pity came too suddenly, too much, which made Nanjia feel a lot unreal and uneasy. She was a bit scared, afraid that it was just a dream for Nank, afraid that the tenderness in Yunqi's eyes was just a self-imposed misunderstanding. Yunqi used her actions to tell Nanjia the answer, making her understand that all of this is true and happening. Nanjia never imagined that her days in Xianghua would be more unforgettable than when she was in her mother country. When Yunqi learned that Nanjia had not studied much, he personally taught her how to read and read. Knowing that Nanjia had suffered a lot since childhood, he took her out of the palace to relax and enjoy herself, bought many interesting little things for her, accompanied her through the streets and alleys, and squeezed into the bustling city. Yunqi will remember Nanjia's birthday. On her birthday, she specially skipped half a day of court meetings and held a grand banquet for her, inviting the best songs, dances, rituals, and music from the country to celebrate her birthday. I will also take care of Nanjia meticulously during her period of trust, unable to see any pain in Nanjia, and repeatedly seek prescriptions from the imperial physician to obtain medicine. When the seasons change, Yunqi will make many of the latest clothes for Nanjia, create the most magnificent jewelry, decorate her palace like a fairyland, and wish to bring all the best to Nanjia. Yunqi's thoughtful treatment gradually lowered Nanjia's guard. She tasted the feeling of being held in the palm of her hand for the first time. If it weren't for encountering Yunqi, Nanjia would never have known that she could also have her own emotions, she could confide her feelings, and she was also worth being treated well and well. So Nanjia began to slowly show a smile, gradually becoming fond of laughter, lively, and full of vitality. For the first time in her life, warm spring has arrived. Nanjia is like a precious treasure, cherishing it exceptionally. However, she is also the first lover, and many things are done for the first time. There are always times when she can't do them well. Whenever she feels sad about it, Yinchi comforts her with gentle words. If Nanjia's emotions are difficult to control, Yinchi will hold her tightly and gently pat her back, patiently listening and persuading her like a child. Every now and then, Nanjia would always be grateful to the heavens for meeting such a wonderful person in this life. But what she didn't know was that the gears of fate had quietly turned. Chapter 4. Palace Transformation. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. De co lois ara trong quatrin lay text. Chapter 5. Sleeping on Salaries and tasting Gallbladder. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Time flies like a shuttle, and the once beautiful land has already changed hands. It turns out that things change and people change, which can happen in a blink of an eye. After the palace coup, Yun-chi passed away. Before leaving, he left a mysterious guard for Nanjia to protect the mother and son. Under the escort of the guard, Nanjia fled with her 2 children all the way, avoiding pursuit and killing, like a startled bird, unable to live in peace everywhere. After 3 years of hiding, the wind finally subsided. At this moment, the mother and son almost escaped to the border. In order to survive in the future, Nanjia could only let the children change their names and surnames, from being extremely honored members of the royal family to becoming one of the many living beings. From then on, she was no longer the mother of a wealthy country and the prince-princess, but the most ordinary and common family of 3. To prevent anyone from recognizing her, Nanjia endured severe pain and burned her face, leaving behind most of the ugly scars on her face. She wrapped it in coarse cloth and looked like an ordinary village woman. At the same time, she changed her previous appetite and ate without restraint every day, eating her delicate body into a round and plump body, making her every move more like a different person. In order to make a living, Nanjia lost her dignity and face. She would do any work that could earn money, such as serving dishes and washing dishes at restaurants, serving tea and pouring water at tea houses. No matter how hard or tiring it was, she could finish it with a smile. Her work is always done cleanly and neatly, always receiving praise from her bosses. However, if she is too outstanding, she cannot avoid being hated by other colleagues and often makes obstacles for Nanjia, both openly and secretly. Nanjia knew everything in her heart, but she remained silent, just silently enduring it. After years of fleeing, the mother and son were already exhausted. Now that they have settled down, she must not have any problems. She needs to earn more money to supplement the children's health. But always doing odd jobs in restaurants and tea houses is not a long-term solution. In order to earn more money, Nanjia came up with the idea of a market. She used her earned wages to buy many fruits, vegetables, and meat, and went to visit her neighbors one by one, asking them for advice and asking how to sell vegetables at the market. The neighbors looked at her as a woman with 2 children, and it was really hard. They were all kind enough to give her advice. Some women feel that Nanjia is really pitiful and will help her take care of her children in her leisure time. Nanjia is grateful and often chooses the best dishes to give to her neighbors before setting up a stall. She also often buys things for her neighbors' children in return. So, during the day, Nanjia had to set up a stall, take care of the children, and busy with household chores. At night, she could only have a few moments of leisure. When in the palace, Nanjia did not blindly pursue pleasure, but constantly worked hard and sought knowledge. She has been exposed to some of the 4 books and 5 classics, as well as the theory of military strategy. Originally, she wanted to help Yun-chi share some of her worries about national affairs, but now it has really come in handy. The guard that Yun-chi left for Nanjia before leaving became her biggest reliance for planning revenge. Every night, Nanjia comforts the children to sleep and comes alone to that secluded shack to meet with the guards. The identities of these guards are absolutely confidential, and Yun Qi has placed them in various important positions in the court at that time. Once there is a change in the court, their identities become their greatest protection, in order to preserve this power. Because of this, these guards were able to access military and political affairs at different levels, and Nanjia was able to understand the current situation from their mouths. Together, they familiarized themselves with military and state affairs and discussed the plan to restore the dynasty. In the daily learning and exercise, Nanjia grew rapidly and gradually became familiar with the once obscure military and state affairs. Nowadays, Nanjia is no longer the pitiful little girl who would only curl up in dark corners and be looked at by others, nor is she a weak woman who would only rely on her husband's wings to avoid wind and rain. She is now a mother, and even more so, a wise and strategic former ruler and empress who bears the responsibility of restoring the country. Chapter 6. Revenge and Revenge. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the blink of an eye, more than a decade of spring and autumn has passed. The children have all grown up and become adults, and the changes in their childhood have made them deeply aware of their mother's difficulties. They have learned to help their mother share her worries at an early age. My son joined the military camp in the year of Nanjia, and my daughter and Hairpin stayed by Nanjia's side all along, helping her plan and strategize, which made Nanjia very pleased. 3 years after his son joined the army, he fought bravely and repeatedly made military achievements, earning him the weight of a high-ranking official. At a young age, he was already a second-class cavalry general, holding a power and reputation that ordinary people couldn't hope for. My daughter is not inferior to my elder brother in any way. She is not only proficient in the 4 books and 5 classics, but also has a good understanding of pharmacy and medical skills. She is a well-known talented woman from all over the country, and naturally, she is also the target of many high-ranking officials and nobles who intend to take her as a concubine. However, the mother and son were all focused on planning a revenge plan and had no intention of dealing with anyone else. After running around for half a life, I am finally about to make it through now. How can this not make people feel overwhelmed and excited? On the day of the plan, the mother and son closed their doors and sat together at the table, discussing every process in detail over and over again, afraid of missing any key points. For over 20 years, they have been secretly accumulating strength, recruiting troops and horses. Now, they have gained considerable influence in the court and among the people, including loyal senior officials and generals who were loyal to the late emperor. Nanjia understood that these old officials were willing to lend a helping hand, not only for the sake of the late emperor, but also for the benefit of the people of the world. The current rulers are debauched and incompetent, leading to chaos in their internal affairs, weakened national strength, unrest among the people, and unstable borders. Such a monarch will only lead the Xiang kingdom into the abyss of destruction, so the downfall of such a dynasty is a matter of time, and it is also a matter of doing justice for the heavens. The years that Nanjia lived were not short, but there were not many precious and nostalgic moments. The only beauty was torn apart and turned into ashes in the palace upheaval more than 20 years ago. Now, it's the day of the Cloud Flag Festival again. Every year at this time, it's the most silent day for this family, but this year is destined to be different because everything, old and new, will come to an end today. Nanjia endured humiliation and lived a miserable life, secretly planning for more than 20 years. The plan was already flawless. Sure enough, everything was progressing as expected, perhaps even the heavens couldn't bear to torture her again, so Nanjia succeeded. This result is faster than she imagined. A great revenge is to be avenged. Nanjia thought she would be very happy, even crying bitterly, but she didn't. She only witnessed with her own eyes the enemy who killed her husband, who was killed by her own son, watching my son regain his royal identity in return to his ancestors, watching my son ascend the throne of the emperor step by step, being elected by the courtiers. Nanjia watched as everything happened and then saw it return to calm, without saying anything from beginning to end, as if an outsider, calmly and awkwardly. The children were very worried about her. Nanjia smiled and said she was fine, just a little tired and wanted to take a break. The palace people crowded around to escort her back to the palace to rest, but Nanjia waved back the palace people halfway and turned to another palace. After more than 20 years, now standing in front of the Phoenix Palace again, it feels like a different world looking at this unfamiliar yet familiar palace, memories that have been shrouded in dust rush in like a tide, flooding Nanjia heavily. Ching-ching, are you okay? Ching-ching, I miss you very much. Ching-ching, tomorrow when I have time, will I take you out of the palace to relax? Ching-ching, don't be naughty, otherwise I will give you a long lesson. Ching-ching, the court situation is probably going to change. Ching-ching, hurry up. Take the children and hurry up. Let's go. Ching-ching, live on. Promise me to live well with the children. Ching-ching, I'm sorry. I can't accompany you anymore. Ching-ching. Ching-ching. Tears burst through the embankment, and Nanjia couldn't help but collapse to the ground, crying loudly. Chapter 7. Life and Death Accompanying Each Other. You are listening at novelfull.audio. 5 years later. Arrogant and avenged, the new emperor ascended the throne, and Nanjia was revered in the Palace of Mercy and became the Empress Dowager. After becoming the Empress Dowager, life in Nanjia was very comfortable. My son is the emperor of a country, and my daughter is the eldest princess. Naturally, she doesn't need to worry about anything. Every day, she only worships Buddha and recites scriptures, and takes care of flowers and plants, so she can pass the day after day. However, only Nanjia herself knew that she had already arranged her way back. Today is the anniversary of the Cloud Flag Festival again. Nanjia specially ordered that all sacrificial ceremonies be exempted, and that only the descendants be gathered together, and everyone sit together, talking and laughing, sharing the heavenly bond, just like many years ago, their family of 4 gathered happily at Fenghuan Palace. The 2 children seemed a bit abnormal when they saw Nanjia, so they both became worried, but were dispelled by Nanjia's reasonable words. Seeing that the mother did not have much negative emotions, the children looked at each other and gradually let go of their worries, continuing to talk about family matters. After calming her son and daughter, Nanjia looked at everyone's faces over and over again, as if she wanted to deeply embed their appearance in her mind, and her spirits gradually drifted away. Husband, have you seen it? Our children have already married and settled down, each with their own destination. Our country is also thriving, and our people are all living and working in peace and contentment. What a beautiful scene. Husband, I have already fulfilled everything I promised you, can you rest assured? You should be fine there. I don't know if you will remember me after all these years have passed. If you see me again, do you still recognize me? My thoughts gradually drifted away, but were pulled back by my grandson's grandmother. Looking down at her grandson's innocent and adorable face, Nanjia's heart softened. She responded softly, "Ah," and then picked up her grandson, placed him on her lap, and coaxed him into playing. The beautiful time always passes quickly, and before we know it, night has fallen. Nanjia felt a bit tired, so she let everyone disperse and was supported by palace attendants to rest in the sleeping hall. When it was still at night, Nanjia slowly opened her eyes and was lost in thought for a moment. Suddenly, she showed a smile, her face full of relief. Nanjia got up and stayed up, found the prepared letter, placed it on the table, and then walked to the dressing table and sat down. Looking at her face in the mirror, Nanjia couldn't help but raise her hand and stroke the faint scar. After her son ascended the throne, he searched all over the world for famous doctors to treat the scars on her face, and now they have been repaired to a great extent. After applying makeup, it is almost impossible to see any signs of being burned by fire. This is okay, this is okay. At least when I see him again, he can still recognize himself. Nanjia murmured, carefully putting on makeup, eyebrows, lips, buns, jewelry, clothes, and carefully organizing her appearance towards the mirror before revealing a satisfied smile. She turned around and walked towards the entrance of the palace. The palace guards sat by the pillar, sleeping soundly. Nanjia knew they wouldn't wake up because she lit the Anshan Xiang. Apart from herself who had taken the antidote, no one would wake up. Raising her feet, she steadily headed towards Fengluan Palace. With each step taken, Nanjia's heart was filled with more relief and anticipation. She knew that she was getting closer and closer to Yunqi. Fengluan Palace is their beginning and their end. Husband, I have kept you waiting for a long time. Now that the children have all started their families and careers, there are successors, the people are happy, and the country is stable, I have nothing to worry about anymore. I should have followed you long ago, but I still have more than one wish left in this world. It's really difficult to accompany me, so I've kept you waiting for more than 20 years. I'm sorry. Now, I have no worries, it's time to come and find you. Husband, wait for me. Chapter 8. Return. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Nanjia felt like she had slept for a long, long time, and had a long, long dream that left her physically and mentally exhausted. A slight piercing light came in, and Nanjia frowned uncomfortably. After adapting for a moment, she moved her eyelids and wanted to open them. Wait, open your eyes. Isn't she already dead? Why can she still control her body and have the consciousness to open her eyes? Realizing something was wrong, Nanjia suddenly opened her eyes, but was stimulated by a strong white light. She quickly raised her hand to cover it, but was surprised to find that her body was incredibly agile, completely devoid of the powerlessness of a dying person. Nanjia was stunned, turned her head, stared blankly at her palm, lost in thought for a while, and finally realized that she didn't seem to have died yet, she's still alive. Did someone save themselves? Nanjia let go and slowly looked around, but the more she looked, the more strange she felt. Why is this place so familiar to the eye? Nanjia remembers. This is clearly her boudoir before leaving the cabinet. But even though she committed suicide in Xianghua, how could she be sent back to Qinghua and to Shoufu Mansion even if she was saved? Moreover, Shoufu Mansion had already been defeated when Nanjia was in trouble in Xianghua. How could this boudoir still retain her appearance before leaving the cabinet? What the hell is going on here? Suddenly, Nanjia felt an itch in her throat and coughed twice, only to be surprised by her own voice. Her voice has changed. This voice is clearly her youthful tone, but she is already almost half a century old. How could she still have such a tone? This is exactly in confusion. Nanjia saw her own hand again, and now she was completely shocked. Is this a comeback? How did one's own hands become so young and delicate? It seemed like she had realized something terrible, so Nanjia quickly reached out and touched her face. Sure enough, the skin is smooth without any trace of scars. Nanjia suddenly had an illusion of soul wandering. Daring not to be in a daze anymore, Nanjia quickly got up, lifted the blanket from her body, and rushed straight to the dressing table without even putting on her shoes. As expected, she saw a face in the mirror that had not yet fully grown, which was exactly what she looked like before leaving the cabinet. Nanjia looked straight at herself in the mirror, not even daring to breathe hard, afraid of missing any small changes. She stared at her like this until her legs became sore, and then Nanjia let out a long breath, feeling relieved and limping to the ground. Nanjia was panting slightly, her heart beating like thunder. Now she can be certain that she has experienced the most absurd and bizarre thing in the world. Nanjia's eyes were sore and his vision was blurry for an instant. There were clattering sounds, like huge raindrops falling to the ground. I raised my hand and touched it, it was tears. After calming down, Nanjia suddenly lifted his arm and took a fierce bite upwards, only to be bitten out with blood. Blood droplets gushed out, and a sense of pain hit. However, she seemed unaware and just looked at the blood droplets, her eyes full of disbelief. For a moment, Nanjia smiled. She didn't know why she was laughing, but she was well aware of her current situation and felt a sense of survival in her heart. If Nanjia is right, now she is reborn. And, she returned to the year of the cardamom, back to where nothing had happened yet, back to the beginning. For a moment, Nanjia was both happy and crying, with mixed emotions and a deep sense of melancholy in her heart. After a while, Nanjia finally managed to calm down. The scenes of her past life kept coming to mind like lanterns, with too many joys and sorrows mixed, making her sigh uncontrollably. At this moment, footsteps sounded outside the door, and Nanjia was startled. She quickly got up and ran back to the bedside, quickly lying down, covering herself with a blanket and closing her eyes. Quickly, the sound of pushing the door rang, and someone walked in towards the bed. Nanjia remained calm and focused, but when she heard the voice of someone approaching, her tears instantly became uncontrollable. That's her mother. Nanjia couldn't help but open her eyes and tears welled up. Auntie. As soon as she spoke, she burst into tears, which made Aunt Song feel uncomfortable. She quickly comforted Nanjia with a warm voice. Nanjia threw herself into Aunt Song's arms and burst into tears, as if she wanted to vent all the grievances of her past life. Aunt Song was startled, thinking that Nanjia was really sick and uncomfortable, so she kept coaxing her. However, Nanjia's tears were like a flood that had been opened, unable to stop. Aunt Song had no choice but to gently pat her back and patiently comfort her. As soon as Nanjia was about to stop crying, she began to chatter with Aunt Song. During the conversation, Nanjia gradually understood the current era and couldn't help but feel a burst of joy in her heart. Heaven pitifully saw that she was called back to the year of GG once again. In his previous life, it was in this year that Nanjia went to Xianghua and married Yunqi. So in this world, can Nanjia still achieve his wish? Chapter 9. Suffering. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the following days, Nanjia continued to live her own miserable life like in her previous life, while counting the days and hoping for the chosen day with her family to arrive earlier. Nanjia misses Yunqi very much, really. In his past life, every night after Yunqi left was extremely cold. Every time he recalled the things he had been with Yunqi, Nanjia's heart felt like 1,000 cuts, so painful that he could hardly breathe, and tears almost dried up. Now, with the mercy of the heavens, Nanjia has been able to live a life of rebirth, to meet and know Yunqi again, to love and stay together. This is the blessing she has achieved through her 3 lifetimes of cultivation. In this life, apart from guarding Yunqi and their children well, Nanjia had no other wish. The days of waiting are always very difficult. Although it is difficult, Nanjia in this life has expectations in her heart. Even if it is difficult, she still feels much better than her previous life. But as time passed day by day, the edict that should have arrived long ago was not heard from, and Nanjia began to feel a little uneasy. If we calculate based on the time of our past lives, the decree of marriage was issued at the beginning of this month, but now it is almost mid-month and we have not heard any news yet. Isn't it? Something unexpected happened. Thinking of this, Nanjia's heart was a bit flustered. If the trajectory of this life is not the same as that of the previous life, does it mean that Nanjia may not be able to serve and choose from relatives in this life, or may not marry Yunqi again? Nanjia was startled by her speculation and didn't dare to think deeply. She ran back to the room like she was running away. If they can no longer marry Yunqi as their wife in this life, will their children also not have the opportunity to come into this world? If that's the case, what should Nanjia do? No. No way. I won't do it, perhaps things are not as bad as I thought. Perhaps I scared myself, maybe I thought too much. Yes, I must have thought too much, definitely. Perhaps the decree has been delayed, or perhaps the internal supervisor who issued the decree has been delayed for some reason. The matter is not yet settled, and everything is possible. It is all unknown, so don't mess around. Nanjia kept comforting herself, trying not to think things worse. She calmed herself down and forced herself not to think recklessly. However, Fate seems to love to play with evil and always likes to go against people, which was once again verified when the end of the month arrived. As the moon turned, Nanjia could no longer sit still. Taking advantage of the cover of night, Nanjia changed into clothes, put on a curtain hat, and led a maid to avoid people and objects all the way. After winding around for a long distance, she finally arrived at a back door of the Shofu mansion. During the day, Nanjia had already taken out some of the money she had saved up during holidays and festivals, and asked the maids to take care of the guards guarding the back door, asking them to quietly let them out of the mansion tonight. If it were usual, the guards would not dare to accept it, but today is the day when Jinshio Winery releases wine, which is naturally different from before. Jinshio Winery is owned by a wealthy businessman in the capital city. Its wine is incredibly rich and fragrant, with a fragrance wafting from 10 miles. Anyone who has tasted it once can no longer refuse it. Originally, this winery was only for high-ranking officials and nobles, but the wealthy businessman was a great benefactor. In order to allow more people to drink wine, the wealthy businessman would release a large amount of wine at the beginning of each month, specifically distributing it to the people who came to taste it. That's why the guards in charge of guarding the back door of the Shofu prefecture were willing to let them out, on the condition that they bring themselves wine when they return. Of course, the guard would not know that the little sisters mentioned by the servant girl would be the 7th lady of Shofu. Otherwise, he would not dare to let others go even if he had 100 courage. It wasn't until the back door walked a long way that Nanjia dared to breathe a sigh of relief. Such a bold thing, whether in past or present life, is the first time she has done it. It really scares half of her life. Chapter 10. Changes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hurry and hurry all the way, circling around, and finally find a tea house. Nanjia put in so much effort today to find a storyteller in this tea house. The Shofu mansion is not as wealthy as ordinary families, with many rules and strict discipline from the main mother, so there are not many opportunities to leave the mansion in Nanjia on weekdays. Occasionally, when Nanjia left the mansion, she also followed her elders to the temple to worship. Her elders never gave her any freedom except for round trips, let alone leisure time in tea houses. The reason why I came to the tea house was because Nanjia had overheard her sisters chatting earlier. The storytellers in this tea house were the common people's 1,000-mile eyes and ears. Whether it was royal secrets or family background, they always had a way to get a clear understanding. The ancients said that Zhuge Liang knew the world's affairs without leaving the mountain gate, but in the eyes of Nanjia, the ability of the storyteller was probably not inferior to him. So, Nanjia decided to come to the tea house to try and see if she could hear any news about marriage. What she didn't expect was that the harvest of her trip tonight was a bolt from the blue. The candidate for the marriage has already been determined, but it's not her, but another official lady. Nanjia felt like being hit on the head and almost fell. She doesn't know how she left the tea house or returned to Shofu prefecture. From the moment she heard the news, Nanjia felt like her soul had been drained away, and her whole body became confused and disoriented. Why it will become like this? Where exactly is the problem? Why did the person who kissed unexpectedly change? Nanjia stood wooden by the window, no longer willing to take off her hat. Through a thin veil, she looked at the bright moon in the night sky, suddenly feeling helpless and wanting to cry without tears. Haha, husband, what should I do? It seems like I can't see you again. Ever since she found out that she had chosen someone else with her family, Nanjia fell ill and treated her well and badly for over a month before finally making some progress. Today, Nanjia's complexion improved a bit, and Aunt Song took her for a walk in the courtyard, saying to sunbathe and go to get rid of her illness. Nanjia didn't have the same interest, but Aunt insisted very much. She had to get up and accompany Aunt outside for a walk. When she got out of the house, her aunt always started a conversation intentionally or unintentionally, but Nanjia didn't have much willingness to take the conversation. It wasn't until her aunt mentioned that the marriage between Qinghua and Xianghua had just ended recently that Nanjia's foot tilted and almost fell. Aunt Song quickly supported Nanjia with a worried expression on her face. Nanjia forced a smile, only saying that it was because she was not fully cured of her illness and lacked strength that she stepped on the empty space, but her heart was already bleeding profusely, dripping all over the ground. For over a month, Nanjia has been forcing herself not to think about marriage. Now she is just an inconspicuous and unpopular illegitimate daughter, no longer the mother of Xiang State, and has no ability to change all of this. Apart from accepting her fate, Nanjia has no other choice. What good is it to think about it again? Feeling dejected, Nanjia suddenly heard her aunt's words and looked up in shock. What? What's going on? How could the last person to marry Princess Showa, who took on the heavy responsibility of marriage from afar, be an old emperor in his 60s? Clearly, when Nanjia married Yinchi in his previous life, he was only 20 or 50 years old. How can it be said that the emperor of Xiangua in this world is not Yinchi? Nanjia took a few deep breaths, her chest slightly heaving and her hands trembling unconsciously. The huge stone pressing down on her heart was suddenly lifted, causing her to feel anxious and uneasy, but also a hint of happiness. If Yinchi is not an emperor yet, does it mean that he may still be with Yinchi? But why did the changes in this life be so significant? Not only did the candidates for Qinghua and Qinqin change, but even the emperor of Xiangua also changed. Can we say that everything in this life is different from in the past? What about Auntie? Isn't Auntie also unlikely to contract the epidemic or pass away? Looking at Aunt Song, who was still talking incessantly, Nanjia's heart suddenly lost its composure. In her past life, Aunt Song contracted an epidemic shortly after marrying into Xianghua in Nanjia, leaving no medical treatment for her illness. She passed away due to depression and illness. In this lifetime, Nanjia was not chosen for marriage, and the capital of Qinghua has not suffered from any epidemics until today. Aunt's health is all well and there are no abnormalities. This is the only fortunate and best news since Nanjia's rebirth. But at the same time, she is also worried. Although many things in this life have undergone earth-shattering changes, things are unpredictable. If a disease were to recur, would my aunt still die from it like in her previous life? Nanjia dare not think about it anymore. She doesn't want to bear the pain of her past life again. If it's really what she wants, then she needs to be prepared for the rain.